Is America in decline? And if so, is there a way back? A new book by award-winning journalist and best-selling author Steven Brill argues not only that America is in decline, but that it has been for the last half-century. Tales spin the people and forces behind America's 50-year fall and those fighting to reverse it makes the bold argument that the forces driving America down are some of the very things that made the country great: the First Amendment, due process, meritocracy, technological innovation, and even democracy itself. The book, which became an instant New York Times bestseller, describes the process by which America has come to be ruled by a small but powerful elite at the expense of an increasingly powerless majority, and the means by which that process can be reversed. Steven Brill joins us now. Steve, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for that introduction, although I should add that it's not that I say that the First Amendment and meritocracy and innovation and all and due process and all that good stuff are bad and we should get rid of them. It's just they need some guardrails.
Well, we'll get to that. I know. I'll give you time to elaborate on that.
That's great stuff.
But the basic argument or the first argument is in the title that the country has been in a tailspin for 50 years. It's been in a fall for 50 years. But Steve, those 50 years are the years of the civil rights victories, the women's rights victories, the gay rights victories, of technological innovation that allows us, among other things, to carry computers in our pockets, and the years of the end of the Cold War. So tailspin.
That's right. That's right. And it's a paradox that I spend, as you know, a fair amount of time acknowledging and explaining. What I mean is that the core of America, the core of the American dream, the notion that you could rise up, that there was always economic mobility, that the middle class would have a good, secure life. Their children would be educated. They'd have more opportunity than their parents had. That has been lost, and it's been lost at the same time that the government has ceased to function, has ceased to provide the kinds of common goods that offer that opportunity to people and that protect people in the workplace, that protect people in terms of their access to the courthouse. Those protections have been gradually, over 50 years, taken away.
So let's talk about your counterintuitive argument that some of the things that made us great play a role. I mean, they're not bad in itself, like meritocracy, like freedom of speech or the First Amendment.
Sure, let's take the First Amendment.
Yeah.
The First Amendment is a great thing. It's the thing I love the most about this country, and as a journalist, obviously I should. Beginning with an innocent, in fact, not innocent, a good lawsuit brought by, of all people, Ralph Nader in 1976, the courts began to recognize that corporations had the same First Amendment rights as people. Now, in the suit that Ralph brought, he was doing a good thing. He argued that a group of discount drugstores who wanted to advertise that they were discounting their prices had a right to do so, and that a law passed in Virginia to protect the large drugstores that weren't discounting, that said that no one could advertise the price of prescription drugs, that law was unconstitutional. And his reasoning was that the First Amendment is meant for listeners as well as the people who are speaking. Your audience has a First Amendment right to hear us talk, just as we have a First Amendment right to talk.
Interesting.
That makes sense. And in this case, the listeners were people who wanted to buy drugs at lower prices. That's all good.
How did it turn bad?
But once you hang that reasoning on the notion that you shouldn't discriminate on the basis of who the speaker is it a corporation or is it a person, you get, by 2010, to Citizens United, which took the same reasoning, which is just because a corporation wants to, inject itself into the political process by spending a lot of money, you shouldn't discriminate against them because they have a First Amendment right to do so.
So that
has basically monetized our political system in a way where there's a scene in my book where I spend an afternoon with a congressman who literally spends 5 hours a day, every weekday, in a windowless room near the Capitol, dialing for dollars and begging people for money. And he is typical. This is not an exception.
Yeah, I know. So the big one that plays a big role, meritocracy.
Right.
Which is really counterintuitive. You yourself, as you write, are a beneficiary of it. You think that that levels the playing field. It had what effect?
It does level the playing field until it doesn't level the playing field. And what I mean by that is that in the 1960s, as you mentioned, I was the beneficiary, along with millions of other people, of a meritocracy movement across the elite institutions of higher education. I got a scholarship to Yale at a time when prior to that, Yale really wasn't taking a lot of people like me. My wife got a scholarship to Yale when Yale wasn't even taking women before that. That's all good. But what that did was it created a group of people in the emerging knowledge economy who were smarter, frankly, than the people that Yale used to take. Because they used to take people, based on, their old boy network.
Right.
So now you had people who did the best in high school,
Who were
did
really
the best
smart,
on their
really
college
good,
boards,
and now they were at the top.
and they were strivers,
and they made sure to
determined.
stay up there.
And they did the natural thing. I did the natural thing. I made sure my kids had the best education because I was fortunate. We were able to afford to send them to private schools. If they needed, tutoring for college boards, they could get that. So what has happened, what this has morphed into, is that places like Yale are less economically diverse now than they were in the 1970s. And the aristocracy is more entrenched because it's based on merit.
Right, and in
now,
fact,
what's the consequence of that?
Yeah.
The consequence of that is that the law firms, the banks, all the places where people with elite educations get the opportunity to work, they also became, determined meritocracies. Suddenly the law firms wanted to hire the absolute best and smartest and toughest people, and therefore the big law firms or the big banks became much better able to defend and enhance the interest of the richest corporations.
And you make the argument very strongly that it's a very powerful elite now. So how do you get that elite? How do you turn things around?
Well, not only is it very powerful, it also has a much more defensible narrative, if you will.
Right. That's
I
part
got
of it.
here
That's part of
because
it.
I
Yeah,
had
that's
great
part of its
grades.
power, right?
I got here because I had great grades.
Yeah.
I'm smart and I work hard. What's wrong with that?
So what gives you optimism that they can be?
Because you have to redefine what meritocracy is, and there are some schools like Amherst and Princeton, for example, that I write about in the book, or Baruch College right here in Manhattan, that are still engines of economic mobility. What Amherst does is they market heavily the fact that they give, really generous loans and scholarships to people, and they are able to attract the same kind of economic diversity that the other places started to attract in the 60s and 70s. So there are ways to solve these problems. There are ways to solve one of the problems that I deal with extensively, which is the problem of how do you train workers, how do you retrain workers who are cast aside either by automation or by the increase in globalization. Every other country does that. No other country makes those workers the victims of our progress. There are job retraining programs. In Germany, something like 60% of the young workers are in apprenticeship programs. We don't do that. We have left these people, we've cast them aside, and therefore it shouldn't be a real shock that they were so frustrated that, almost a majority of them, 46% of them, turned to the ultimate antithesis of the meritocracy, Donald Trump.
But Steve, you talk about Europe being in advance of us, and as far as that's concerned, but we see the same phenomenon with Brexit in Italy now, with a five-star movement, a populist movement in Hungary, and other Eastern European countries also have populists taking on their elites. Are they dealing with their own?
Well, that's more, that's more a nationalist, kind of a populism than I think it is here, where it's being expressed here as, nationalism because that's the demagoguery of the incumbent president. But here, and what I'm focusing on is here, because we are an exceptional country. We always prided ourselves on being an exceptional country that offered opportunity to everybody. And most people, a majority of people in polls, actually don't think their kids are going to be better off than they are, which is a total reversal of everything this country is.
Sure.
And
So,
that is expressed
let me close.
in the frustration that you saw in the 2016 election.
So let me just close because we're almost running out of time. But you give a lot of examples. You gave a couple here, but you give more in the book of institutions, individuals making a change that could reverse the tailspin.
Exactly.
But what makes you so optimistic? I mean, as you so well described this meritocratic elite as being so powerful, how do you?
Because
Why do you believe that we can really turn it around?
Because a whole bunch of that elite have now turned the other way and become so frustrated that they are devoting themselves, often, unsung, to figuring out solutions to the problems we have. How can we get back to bipartisan, policymaking? How can we really do the job of retraining workers? What can we really do about the crumbling infrastructure? And as I went around basically to gather all the stats about all the bad news, I went to the people who were working on the problem, and suddenly it dawned on me that they're the story, because they're out there, they're working, they insist that the country can be turned around. And I think when people, finally snap, and when things get so frustrating, they will turn to these people for their solutions, which is what I spend the last part of the book on.
Right. You do. Well, the book is Tailspin, The People and Forces Behind America's 50-Year Fall and Those Fighting to Reverse It. Steve, it's a New York Times bestseller. It's a fascinating read. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about it.
Great to see you.